Hey everybody, welcome to our brand new episode of Cloud Cafe. Today we're gonna deep dive again in the world of Amazon Web Services together with my guest today, Sidney Borrego y Diaz. He's an AWS cloud consultant currently working for Xibia Cloud, and he's gonna show us how it works within the infrastructural part of the cloud. As always, we would like to know more about him, his path toward the cloud, and also who is the person behind the cloud. Sidney, thank you for being with me today. Pleasure to meet you. How was your approach to AWS? How did you end up there? What did you particularly like to stick with AWS?
I started working with AWS out of necessity, actually. In my previous job, I was a desired stage engineer, I guess you could call it. I worked a lot with Puppet and Ansible. And at the time, it was entirely, let's say, it was in a consultancy firm. We didn't have any hardware at the time, and we wanted to develop a proposition around desired state management of customer infrastructure, and we needed infrastructure to run our proposition on, essentially. And at the time, we needed to do something. We weren't going to buy hardware, obviously. We had heard about AWS before and Azure, of course. A lot of our customer base back then used Azure. But we wanted to start quick and dirty. And at the time, AWS was known for how well it worked for developers and getting things kickstarted in like startup, POC kind of things. So we just pulled out the credit card and started open an account. And that's basically how I got in touch with AWS. I had to get infrastructure, and that's where you could get it per hour. So we actually built the proposition there on AWS to try and play around with it because we needed hardware. So that's where it started. Then when I figured out that it was pretty neat, because Puppet and Ansible got a bit boring after a while, and I was like, yeah, this AWS stuff is was way cooler, basically. Why don't I stick with that and play around with that a bit more? And at the previous employer wasn't getting the space to do that. Mm-hmm. So a few colleagues of mine at the time had left my previous employer, joined Oblivion at the time, AWS partner in Benelux, and I reached out to them. I said, "Hey, are you still open for more people?" And I instantly got a call, and that's kind of how I moved from the other field to AWS entirely, because essentially I started like with no knowledge, and then I jumped on the Oblivion train basically, and that's where it really kicked off, because I had to start from zero there, and I had to get ready because I was dealing with quite a few AWS WizKids, and being surrounded by those guys at the time was like a revelation or mind-blowing to see how well people were dealing with AWS as a platform, what all the kind of cool stuff they were doing. So I was pretty much sold to AWS as a technology because of the people around me at the time at Oblivion when I joined. And the rest is history, I guess. I've been doing nothing but AWS for the past 5 years. I still have a tendency to draw towards networking because that's originally where I started. I did a 4-year study on network infrastructure design. So Cisco, Microsoft stuff, but like a lot of programming of routers and switches, and but that was really deep networking, and I at some point got bored of that. So and this is kind of like the middle ground. So I do edge towards networking AWS. It's really my niche, I guess, within the company. I just love that. It's like a puzzle that you get to solve over and over for every customer and every customer case again and again and again. And that's why I keep getting drawn to that part of it. Still the infrastructure bits, but a bit more high level than it used to be when I was still in university.
Like customers, clients obviously are becoming more and more aware of the benefits of having cloud within their own business. Mm-hmm. Do you think in the overall there's still some steps to take in terms of awareness? Do you think there's still plenty of companies that maybe think it's something that you can kind of giving a second consideration to that? Because I hear plenty of colleagues that are like, yeah, despite, the already intense awareness that we have about the benefits of cloud services within the company, automation, flexibility, just to mention a few. But there's still plenty of companies out there that they believe that is mainly for like big companies, in order to scale their work. But they think it's not a big deal when you stay in a little bit of a smaller size, which is a kind of misconception.
I think so too. I think actually, if you look at it, I think it's a lot more beneficial for smaller companies as opposed to bigger companies because of OPEX, CAPEX, etc. But I think the biggest shift still needs to happen in the way of thinking that our customers have towards the cloud, not just it being potentially the primary target platform, for example, to host their workloads, but also the way you use it. Like a lot of companies and customers still look at AWS as a cloud-based data center, and they treat it like such. They're very focused on, using static IP addressing to identify types of systems and whatnot. And it's just a really old-fashioned way of thinking. They really need to start embrace the dynamics of a cloud environment, right? Its nature is elastic. You use the cloud to become elastic and flexible. And if you then still treat it like an old, still environment where you had to screw in a hard piece of hardware into a rack, configure it, and then leave it there until it burns down and you replace it with a new one. If you keep that same mindset, you're never going to really, truly benefit from the advantages of the cloud. So the cool stuff, the new services, obviously is a big advantage, which a lot of customers will enjoy, but it's actually the shift, like you said, from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things, where the real benefit is, in my opinion, at least. And for the smaller companies, actually, because you're smaller, it gives you like a room to wiggle. You can be a lot more dynamic. I think it's a lot easier to move 5 people in a team that need to maintain your operation and your infrastructure, as opposed to moving and shifting the mindset of hundreds of people that are running your data centers across the globe. So I think it's actually the other way around. Smaller companies benefit more from the flexibility and the new way of doing things.
So would you say that companies shying away a little bit of adopting the cloud, it's out of, let's say, not seeing the full benefit of it? What do you think is the main cause of those who are still skeptical in taking a step forward?
There's a few things. So for sure, habits. Like I think a lot of people are scared to move away from what they know. And I think that you see that a lot with our customers, right? A big problem, I think, in cloud adoption is education. And I think a lot of people will shy away from something that is new because it's going to shift their way of doing things. Some people might be afraid to lose their jobs because of the new way of doing things. Like think about a database administrator, for example. Their jobs, to some extent, are actually taken away by using cloud properly, like using managed services and whatnot. So that's for sure a big factor. That's why I think a lot of the enthusiasm starts bottom up, but then needs to be driven top down to actually make a move towards cloud. But the enthusiasm starts bottom up, and if people are afraid that using those technologies are going to change their jobs, I think the technology enthusiasm will be, like, let's say, hampered or limited.
And staying a little bit further on the AWS zone, I heard there was this kind of recurring joke from your colleagues when you started by joining Oblivion, because you are, let's say, you're an avid collector of AWS certifications, right?
Yeah.
I saw you got plenty on your portfolio. And among those that you already mentioned regarding, for example, networking, I spotted one is the AWS Alexa Skill Builder. So we know what it is about, Alexa. What does actually consist in? I kind of have an idea, but I would like to...
So the whole collection of certificates actually started as an internal contest between employees. There's a few people that started going up against each other, like, hey, there's a new certification. Okay, let's go and get it, right? So it kind of like started like a mini contest, not a real contest, but kind of like a running joke. Like, okay, let's collect the next one, and let's collect the next one. And at the time that I was doing that, and other people were doing that, there were, I think, a total of 12 certifications. One of them being the Alexa Skill Builder. I had collected 11 of them, and then Alexa being the only one left. And because I wanted to get them all, I had to do the Alexa one. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to have them all. And if I had them all, at least would be the second person in the company to have them all. So I had to get it. So that's the only reason I got it, because it's kind of pointless, to be honest with you.
Oh.
It didn't take a lot of studying, so that was a good thing. I did end up making a Alexa skill for at home, just for fun.
The device.
Yeah, just for fun to play around with it. But it's an entirely pointless. There was the purpose of the certification is to use Alexa in the business, but I can't honestly come up with a use case that actually makes sense. So this is the first and the last time that I did something with it. Just build a custom skill to prepare for the exam and then just dump it into the closet and never touch it again.
All right. So now you have a full set of certification.
Actually, no.
Because
no.
Well, now there are many more.
There's actually, I have all but one. So nowadays there's 13 or 14. And nowadays you can get a golden jacket if you get them all. Like a really, really, really ugly golden jacket. But it's kind of, you kind of want it. I kind of wanted it for quite a period of time. And I kind of missed the boat because at some point AWS introduced the sub specialty, the SCP specialty. And I think that was the line for me. I tried studying for that for like, I don't know, maybe 2 days of effort. And I was like, yeah, never mind. I'm not going to do this. So I'm always max -1 because I just refuse to do that. I kind of gave up on it because it takes a lot of time to keep up with everything. You have to refresh them. And it's a lot of fun to a certain extent. When it starts consuming a lot of your free time, and it's only so much fun anymore.
Indeed. Also because I can imagine maybe at your level, it's not a big deal in terms of complexity, but despite minimum, it's still time consuming. And you always want to keep it, the funny part of it, the interest as high as possible, you know?
So,
otherwise it becomes mainly just like for the sake of fulfilling, you know?
And to an extent that's fun, but there, like you said, right, there's a foundational set of certifications that I think everyone should have, and those are easy to maintain based on your day-to-day operations or work. But there's a few specialty exams that are just, you have to be working on these kind of things to actively and maintain that knowledge. And if you don't, you really have to study for these certifications as if it were an exam in high school about a new topic. And I had the same problem with the machine learning certification. I think I spent weeks, I even took a week off to study for the exam because it was all raw new material. I had nothing to do with machine learning and big data at the time. And that just took so much time. And if you're not working actively, some of these specialties are just a gimmick to have, I think. Same for this one, for example. It's just a lot of time. And although fun, and it injects you with a lot of new knowledge, and that's a lot of fun, at some point that quickly goes away, right? If you don't actively work on machine learning on AWS, the things you learned for the exam are going to be forgotten 2 months later.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, I think, especially considering the amount of time you have to put in some of them.
Especially, yeah, indeed. But hey, you gotta do what it takes to get that damn golden jacket, right? Did anybody of you got a whole set of certification yet? Send us a pic of the jacket.
I wonder if there's Exhibian. I'm not aware of one, at least, that has them all.
We might ask. But as you trigger me saying that indeed there are some key certification, of course, some sort of fundamentals.
Yes.
So which one would you suggest to someone that is brand new to the cloud?
Good question. So if they're entirely brand new to the cloud, like really first hello world kind of experience, start with the practitioner. I think if you've got some experience in the cloud, you can kind of skip that. But if you really still have to learn what the cloud is in general, then start with the practitioner. Everybody can do it. Like we have people in the sales team that have done the practitioner. It's relatively low, let's say low level to start with. I think everybody can start it. And I think by far the easiest exam to pass. After that, you have the associate level. Like I think anyone that wants to build a career in cloud, like in AWS at least, needs to get the associates, all 3 of them. Now after that comes the professional level. I think if you want a solid base, you get both the solutions architect professional and a DevOps professional, I think from the top of my head. Those 5 at least, I think you should have. Like I think everyone should have them. And also keep them up to date. Not just do them once and then forget about them, but refresh them. Because if you refresh the professionals, you automatically refresh the associates. So you only have to keep up 2. You have to first pass all 5, but after that, you don't have to anymore. You don't need the associates, but in my opinion, it's a good start. So I would start with those, and if you're then still enthusiastic after all those hours of studying, because I think it's going to be a while if you do from the practitioner all the way to the professionals and get all of them, then the specialties become interesting. But those are a lot more aligned on in-job experience, I think. And if you don't have the experience, like I mentioned with the machine learning one, it becomes real dry studying, and that becomes, I think, the effort comes significantly larger. But I think professional and associate is at least a fantastic start, I think, to...
So these ones, let's say, are a little bit the building blocks in order to create a strong foundation, and then you decide which way you want to specialize with the other ones that you mentioned further.
If you want to specialize, then sure. I think a lot of the strength of the cloud, I guess, is that you can be a generalist to do, like, let's say 60 or 70 or 80% of the work that needs to be done. However, the specialties kind of put you in a place where you have the knowledge, or you prove, quote unquote, you have the knowledge about a certain specialty that you can deep dive in. But I don't think it's necessary to deep dive into certain topics. It's just a nice way to, let's say, again, quote unquote, prove that you know something about a certain topic. But I don't think the specialties are necessary at all. Especially, maybe the security one. I think the security one is something that should really be more towards the fundamental ones, I think, personally. But again, not like super required to build a good starting foundation to get work in the field.
I would like to know a little bit about how you started your first steps, because you've been a consultant for more than 10 years, if I'm not wrong. You've been also experimenting multiple companies, but always mainly related to consulting. So a question that triggered my mind is like, wow, it's like one of the very first job experiences within consultancy is challenging, because if you join a company that is not doing consulting, maybe you don't need to have those high-level soft skills compared to instead working in a consulting company where the hard and the soft skill are basically at the same level. So what was the challenge at the beginning? When you have to deal with clients, maybe you have to, I wouldn't say sell yourself, but convince them also which is the best way to reach the end of the project or the purpose for which you get hired, considering it as a new starter, right?
That's an interesting question. I think my consultancy skills really stem from my second employer forward. So my previous employer, Angzibia, because both companies really invest into learning these kind of skills. My first employer was more, okay, you're an engineer, do your engineering task, and that's it. You have higher ups that you report to, and you execute what they demand of you. Whereas my second and third employer, so previous and Angzibia, really focus on the way you frame yourself towards a customer, becoming an advisor of the customer rather than just a puppet in their execution scheme, right? That does tasks on demand. And I think that made a big difference. I think that made it a lot easier. My previous employer invested, I don't know how many hours in getting me kickstarted and communicating in a certain way. CBS does the same, right? We have all these opportunities to get training, to become better at these soft skills. And I think that made a big difference, I think, in my jump into consultancy. I was primed by both my employers. Because I think some of that, like a lot of the, I think scary parts of consultancy is standing in front of your customer and saying, this is what you need to do. Like, be comfortable in the position, being confident about what you have to say. And I think a bit of training and being, quote unquote, forced in front of a group to talk about what you think is the right thing to do, which again is, I wouldn't say the forcing is something Zebia or my previous employer do, but it's let's say a stepping stone, right? They're giving you the stepping stone. Hey, if you want, you can get a stage. Get on top of the stage and tell your colleagues how you would do it. And because you do that more often, because you're asked and invited to do so, you become more comfortable. And if you're comfortable at it, a customer is going to look at you and think, he's comfortable in talking about this. He must know what he's talking about. It doesn't always have to be the case. I'd like to think so, but I think that being given access to a stage to learn how to speak comfortably to an audience, even though a small audience, right? Might be 5 people, but getting used to comfortably speak around to a group of people, I think is a big factor in how customers perceive you.
Absolutely. Also because you have to consider the fact that sometimes people do not necessarily go on stage to provide a solution, but maybe to raise some awareness about how to face a problem in a different way. So it's not that obviously if you're the speaker, you're bringing a light necessarily. Sometimes it's also, we're facing this issue, we have worked on this way, and it might work or not. It's about bringing the results sometimes, but it's mainly also how to bring the awareness about the specific issues. And moreover, communities, like especially the tech community, is pretty much collaborative. So it's a good chance, if you get to the stage also, then what happens afterwards? You can talk with a lot of people that can provide you with suggestions. And I think it's just awesome, like it's if you're just willing to take the first step, which is a big step.
Yeah, for sure. It can be a bit scary sometimes.
It is,
especially
for sure.
in community kind of environments, like a community day for AWS, having a stage or a room filled with 100 seats. I mean, pretty damn scary, if you ask me.
So suppose you're a fresh graduate, right? So you just studied in the field of IT. And instead of jumping into a product company, you decide to start in consultancy, which is a big step, Which suggestion would you give? Of course, you're going to go through a training. Is there anything that you see yourself in the past and that you will eventually have done differently to facilitate, the growth, or any
Interesting
tips
question.
and tricks?
Yeah, so I think I made a deliberate decision to go into consultancy and not to go into a product company. Product companies often pay very well comparatively to consultancy firms, but I made a decision to go to a consulting company because you have a wider variety of experience you can get. I think for me it's been very beneficial because it not only allowed me to taste different kind of company cultures, but because I didn't really know what to do when I finished university. I was done with networking, but I didn't know what I did want to do. Being part of a consultancy firm ensured that I tried different type of projects with different roles. Okay, sometimes I'd be a bit more in the lead role, sometimes hardcore engineering, sometimes I do Linux, sometimes I do Windows, and slowly but surely, because of tasting all these different company cultures and different technologies, I could slowly grind towards, okay, this is the kind of thing that I enjoy. Let me try and focus on that, becoming better on that. And I think, especially if you don't know what you want to do yet, early in your career, I can only recommend going to a consultancy firm to play around. Obviously, making commercial for GBI here, because you have ways
casually.
just casually, dropping the name here. The thing is, let's say you join a consultancy firm because you think data engineering is cool. You've done a bit of Python on high school and university. You thought it's cool. Let me try that. And you join a consultancy firm. You try you become part of an assignment, and you are the data engineer on the assignment. But next to you is the guy or girl doing GCP, putting your data engineering work into real practice by using cloud services and whatnot. And you look at that and you think, that's pretty cool. And because you're in a consultancy firm, I think that's a bit more likely to happen, because then you can go up to your team lead or manager or whatever you want to call it, and then you can address it. Like, hey, my learning path, can I maybe move towards that, play a bit more in those kind of projects? And because you're in a consultancy firm, you actually have the wiggle room to experience that if you have a good consultancy firm.
Supposedly, yeah.
Whereas if you join a product company, for example, you're hired as a data engineer. And for you to then make the transition to a, GCP engineer, AWS engineer, I think is going to be a bit more difficult. And you're really stuck to a singular way of working, how that company operates, as opposed to, for example, I do 2 clients. I share my week between 2 clients, so I get both of the types of ways of working. And I can really feel, okay, this works for me and this doesn't. Whereas if you're stuck in one of them, I think it's a bit more difficult to move around. And I think, especially early on in your career, that's a benefit. If you don't know what you want to do, I think that's a really important emphasis. If you know you want to do, Kubernetes or something, and product company XYZ is full-blown Kubernetes, and then why not go for that? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think many people, when they finish their studies, know exactly what they want to do. And I think then a consulting company is way, way better than...
True, yeah. You always, I think it's pretty common after you're done study, you have a little bit that blur in your mind, or maybe you have an idea about, how to implement it, or which are your first steps until getting there. Definitely. And so you're handling 2 clients at the same time, basically. You were saying that's a kind of a pro mode.
Actively, man. There's more than 2 clients that I have to deal with, but
okay.
2 I actively are involved. I'm involved with every week. But there's a few other clients that I sometimes take a little sidetrack jump in when necessary. Yeah.
And if we can discuss a little bit about it, what are you currently up to in your main projects? Let's say.
So I work for two big, my two main projects right now. One is for a product company, a chemical distributor. The other one is a government agency. I have to say a bit vague on that. But those are my two main clients right now. For the product company, we're building and slowly further developing a AWS landing zone on a global scale. So a pretty complex project, at least from my perspective, from a technology standpoint. So that's been a lot of fun. We started that about a year ago. I think things are going well. We've helped the customer recruit their own people to slowly phase us out because we eventually want the customer to be self-sufficient. We're slowly in that stage where more and more of our people are getting phased out and replaced by people on their side. And I think that's going well. I think about a year in now, I'm kind of ready for the next thing, I think. It's starting to feel that way. And it's, for me, I wouldn't say the job's almost done, but I do feel that I've given most of the value that I can offer at this point in time. Now it comes into the hand of the team itself and the customer itself, and they just have to take it from here and grow it further, I think. But that's the period I am in there. It's a long running show by now, so like a year and 2 months, I think. And then for the other customer, it's a lot smaller scale. It's a platform that's currently being used by, I think, 3 teams, so way smaller. But there we get to play around with some technologies that I usually don't get to play around with other customers. So I get to, let's say, do a bit of like searching, POCing, that kind of thing, like building proof of concepts to see if we can provide a certain type of value to that customer that they can't provide from an on-premise platform, because they have a really mature on-premise environment. But they're limited to what technologies they can offer. So we get to play with the cool stuff in AWS. So that's also a lot of fun. So it's a bit of both. The standard big enterprise, static, slow growth kind of environment, as well as the other side where we get to play around with the cool shiny toys.
All right. Well, it sounds you have quite of a busy week on a weekly basis. Let's
sometimes,
say.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
You know, when we discuss with people of a certain level of experience, engineers, whether they're cloud consultants, software engineers, each one of them has a specific preferred way of sharing knowledge, you know? We're not talking only about the classic channel, I don't know, GitHub, instead of blogging, instead of getting part into conferences. Which is your favorite way?
Speaking, absolutely.
Speaking?
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty comfortable talking.
Okay.
And I don't mind talking in front of groups. I mean, I get nervous, but relatively speaking, I've tried a few blog posts, and I did enjoy writing them. But when I do when I look for public exposure in a blog post or a speaking event, I want the thing that I write or talk about to be complex enough to try out my brain and see if I can figure something out in depth.
Oh.
And I think with a blog post, it gives me way too much time to think and overthink what I'm going to write down. Whereas when I'm doing a presentation at a conference or whatnot, I just jot down some bullet points. I make a PowerPoint presentation just with bullet points, and I talk my way through it, which is a lot more flexible, and it takes a lot less preparation on my end. So for me, that's a lot more comfortable. And that's why I've been almost exclusively focused on speaking rather than making blog posts. For me, it takes way too much energy because I overthink things way too much.
But it's good to see, you know, how people has different ways of sharing knowledge. Some people has both. Some people, in your case, prefer to focus more on the oral part of it, let's say.
Actually, I think about a half a year ago, I did a training about that here at Exibia. It's an internally hosted training. I think it's called Find Your Guru. And you spend like a whole day trying to figure out what works for you in terms of sharing what you know or what you want to know to the outside world. And during that process, I already figured out, okay, clearly I have like some kind of objection to writing. Why don't I just focus on the thing that I think I'm comfortable with? And then all the other stuff like LinkedIn posts and blogs can either be derived from my talks, which is, I think, a lot easier rather than focusing on a blog and writing out the whole blog. If I first do a talk and then write about the talk, like a summary of the talk in a blog post, it's way easier. And I think that the training helped me a lot in that, actually, into identifying what works for me and what doesn't, and then using that to my advantage. Yeah, I think though the advantage of speaking, especially at least the way I position my slide deck for myself, is I just jot down bullets. I don't make a story on my slide, so I have to work with the bullet points I give myself, and I can just say on the spot what comes up in my head, and nobody else in the audience knows what I was going to say when it came to that bullet. So the advantage for me is that even if I don't remember what I wanted to say, if I say something in the area of that bullet and I make it come across that this is what I wanted to talk about, everybody's going to be like, oh, that's part of his story. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a blog post, you really have to digest every single topic and write it out. And I think that's a big difference. You can be a lot more flexible while you do it on the spot. And I agree, it's a lot more error prone when you're in front of a crowd. I do like to make jokes in my talk, so when I make a mistake, I try to turn it into a joke, so it also lightens the mood. And if you then make a mistake again, people are just gonna laugh at you, and that's perfectly fine. I don't mind that at all. I don't mind making mistakes in talks, much rather than putting something in writing and putting it on the internet and it being wrong. That's way worse for me. But that's a personal preference, I think.
I really agree with that also because you're keeping the human part of it, right? I mean, you make a mistake, you crack a joke. I mean, nobody's going to judge you for that.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's
also
why
because
like
if you're just reading your own PowerPoint presentation or whatever it is, where's the personal part of it?
Exactly. And the speaking just allows you to go with it and flow with whatever the crowd is, I guess, is giving you. And I think it's a lot more flexible, and I like it for that reason.
One non-technical or job-related question that comes in my mind is like when we got to know each other and I read your name, I saw that your surname was really suggesting some sort of a Spanish root in your family, right? Do you have a...
Yeah, my father's Spanish.
Your father is Spanish?
Yeah, that's about as exciting as it gets. My father's Spanish, my mom's Dutch.
Okay.
And they incorrectly copied my last name. So
incorrectly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in Holland they don't know the difference, or they don't know how Spanish last names work, which is they put together your father's last name and your mother's last name and put the Y-E in the middle. So father's last name E, mother's last name. That's the way it's constructed.
Oh.
But instead, my father, when they registered me, they copied my father's name. So I technically have the last name of my grandfather and grandmother. Which is great because it sounds way better this way than a Spanish plus Dutch combination. So it's a happy accident, I would say. Yeah.
It created something unique. Like, how is your fluency with Spanish?
Horrible. Yeah. No, so I speak Spanish enough to get around Spain.
Okay.
But I've never had to practice other than with my grandparents. My Spanish family that lives here, and my entire family lives here, speaks fluent dialect Dutch. So I grew up in Limburg.
Oh, yeah.
We have the dialect from there. My entire family speaks that dialect, so I have never had the chance to actively train my Spanish other than with my grandparents. So it's been relatively limited, the exposure.
All right, maybe sometimes on holiday, probably.
Exactly. That's when I get to redo it, and it works okay. Like I know enough to get around.
You grew up in the Limburg area.
Yes, sadly enough, yes.
How come? Was it like nearby Maastricht or something?
No, up in the north, in Venlo, of all places.
Oh, Venlo,
yeah. So I grew up there, and I just don't like Limburg as a whole. Like people from Limburg are generally very reserved, and they tend to shy away from being direct. They like to take detours. And I think one thing my colleagues will know about me is that I don't take any detours. I make the point that I want to make, and that often creates conflict in Limburg. So for me, that was a clear point of friction. That's why I moved. Part of the reason that I moved was because I constantly had problems with the directness and how people from Limburg are usually not direct. I'm not generalizing, by the way, but
sorry,
I think,
people from Limburg. Yes. Don't take it personal.
Yeah, so
it's just an opinion.
Yeah, it's an opinion for sure.
Feel free to confirm or deny.
Yes.
It's interesting because, of course, if we take the stereotypical perception of Dutch behavior, we tend to put everything in a box, like with every single country, and we say everybody tends to be pretty straightforward. But in this case, it seems to be probably some parts of behavior that got inherited from a nearby France or I don't know, Belgium.
I think Belgium. Well, Belgians can actually be quite direct as well, but I think Germany is more on the edge of being a bit more careful towards your peers, and so I think there might be because Limburg's dialect actually sounds a lot like German, so I'm pretty sure there's an overlap there. Again, apologies.
I heard about Venlo. I haven't had a chance to visit that yet. I know there is this place when basically all the three countries in the border
that's
are
not
put
Venlo,
together.
man.
It's not Venlo.
No, that's Drielandenpunt. That's somewhere in the south.
That is
Way further.
okay.
At least that, as far as I know.
I got the wrong information. Like they told me there's this sort of wood or part of forest outside the city in which I don't know if it's literally scripted like, hey, here you got a border with Belgium and in the side you have Germany and
I mean, maybe
in the middle.
Maybe, but I don't think so. Venlo's, no, I can't imagine.
All right, so probably
maybe,
must be some province or something over there. All right. And when we got our introductory call, I spotted behind you your bookcase this reoccurring title, Atomic Habits.
James Clear, yeah.
Yeah, especially since the beginning of the year, I see a lot of people like reading this book, and it's also in my kind of purchase list. And we all know what it is about, obviously. So my question is there any key habits that you develop?
Oh yeah,
so far.
I just read the book out of interest, not because I wanted to learn a new habit or unlearn an old existing bad habit, for example. I just read it because it was being hyped up all over the place. It was a number one bestseller. Exactly.
I mean, Atomic.
Yeah, so I bought the book just for fun. Then at some point I thought, you know what, maybe I'll try some of this stuff out. And I tried to learn or to incorporate flossing my teeth into my daily routine more often. So I just used the book and the learnings from the book and parts of it. I don't think everything is as applicable as James makes it out to be in the story. And but some of them actually make quite a lot of sense. So I think there's like 5 laws, I think he calls them. Make it obvious, make it attractive. You have to make it easy. I think satisfying is one of the other ones, and they have let's say goals. So for example, make it satisfying is if you complete the new habit you're trying to learn, make it satisfying. So set a checkbox somewhere on your habit tracker, right? You have this little tracker where you say, today I flossed in the morning, today I flossed in the evening. And every time you set a checkbox, it releases some dopamine is his point of he's trying to make. And I incorporated some of those to try and teach myself the habit of flossing. It's such a trivial thing. But it actually worked. I tried it out with it, and I've been doing it ever since I bought the book, and consistently.
Works great.
Yeah, it's just at this point also, it's like, why would I give up now after I've been doing it for so long, so consistently? So it's a great book, and you should buy. You can borrow mine if you want.
I tend to write in books, so I don't know if you might like it. I tend like to use them literally as a student. Let's say.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. A good idea.
And put some sticky notes. So yeah. But it's kind of also personalizing that, like giving what you learn from that. And the interesting part about what you told me about the book is that, you have plenty of books about self-development out there. The whole industry is a profitable industry per se. But many books, let's say, they literally tell you what to do. Like wake up at 5 a.m. Now, okay, I put it like a joke. Wake up at 5 a.m., drink your electrolyte drink, and then go to the gym or whatever, which is not a bad thing, by the way, absolutely. But many books are really focused on a one-size-fits-all kind of routine. Instead, what you're saying about Atomic Habits, that is more how to create the structure. You decide what you want to implement, and you just create the habit for that to be continuous and successful for you, to find also the satisfaction behind it.
Absolutely. And for me, a thing that I liked about the book as well is that it explains the psychology behind it also. So it's not just do this, then it will work, or don't do this and then you'll achieve your goal. But it's also, okay, when you make the checkbox on your habit tracker, of course, that's something he also tries to sell on his website. But like when you tick the checkbox, it releases dopamine. Just that little bit of psychology that's being explained for me was also interesting, and makes it more interesting than some of the other, self-help books like the 4-Hour Workweek or Getting Things Done and stuff like that we have in the closet here at the office. All like great books in their own way.
Yeah.
But this book a lot, like you said, also plays into what works for you. or what doesn't work for you. Make it fit. And you won't use all of it, like I said, right? You're not going to use every single thing that he states in his book. I mean, maybe if you're really, if you're verge on the level of OCD or something like that, you'll follow everything to the last letter. But I think the book's flexibility kind of like allows you to explore what works for you and what doesn't, and use that for learning new habits.
Atomic Habits, ladies and gentlemen. Link in the description. No, I'm joking. I would like to ask you, how do you like to spend your time when you're not working or when you're not into your projects? You know, do you practice any sports, any habit, let's say?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty casual runner and gymmer. I don't do either of them religiously, but I do try to work out 4 to 5 times a week, either gym or running.
That's like awesome. 4 to 5 times.
I used to do 5 times gym. And then I switched to 5 times running.
Okay.
And then I decided, okay, let's not stick to such a rigid schedule and just do whatever I feel like at whatever day and what the agenda allows. Basically, it's a bit agenda-driven exercise, if you want to call it that way. So that's a bit more casual. I sometimes play video games on my PC or my Switch that I got as a 5-year anniversary gift from Zebia.
What do you like to play usually?
A big thing that I'm playing right now is Zelda, the first Zelda on the Switch. It's a really rough game to get through. I'm not a big story gamer, so that's taking me a lot of time and a lot of energy to get through. But it's a really cool game, so I'm spending a lot of time on that now. And then when I'm not gaming, and then usually between work and dinner, I also try to trade stocks on the stock market a bit just for fun, out of interest, to learn a new skill, more than specifically to earn a living or something. It's more to kind of like a new study, if you will, to learn that as a skill more than, like I said, to earn money off of it. Because I'm not earning money. not consistently.
So I assume you're not passing your paycheck directly into the platform,
No,
right?
No, absolutely not. No, that would be silly.
Do you have any specific type of stocks or commodities that you usually target, or you would like to?
It started with GameStop. I'm sure you've heard of it in the news at the time. That's where it started, where the adrenaline and the dopamine came from.
It was some 4 years ago or something like that?
2 years, roughly 2 years. Yeah, I think 2 years ago.
Yeah,
2.5 maybe. That's where it started. And from that, I started diving into the whole idea of what that is. And then I realized that it's technically, if you do it well, if you learn to do it well, it's the most scalable way of income that you can possibly have. So that's how it that's interesting.
Yeah, who doesn't like to make bucks?
I mean, I prefer my regular job, to be honest. A lot less stressful. And from that, I started just looking into options, which is where a lot of people lose their money to play around with that. I also did. And then from that, I started looking into in futures, index futures. And that's kind of where I'm settled now, where I'm playing around with certain strategies and seeing if that works. And it's been fun. It's an interesting thing to learn, for sure. It's taking a lot of my free time, and a lot of the books in the bookcase you saw were dedicated to learning how to do it.
I think it's an underrated skill, and not necessarily trading or stocks, but more like financial education. I would
Absolutely,
say. Something like that, or even financial responsibility.
Financial literacy, I think, is already
indeed.
There are
That's
a lot
pretty
of people
much
that are financially illiterate, for sure. Like it's a lot of people don't understand the concept of compounding interest. I think that was the biggest revelation I ever had in my entire life history. When I understood how that worked, I was like, oh, I'll stop myself from swearing here. But that was a mind-blowing concept, and I think that's where it picked off. When I was like, okay, that's something I need to grasp and understand how that works better, and how can I get there, and how can I make sure that grows bigger. And that's why the enthusiasm really started.
Absolutely. Also because I believe there is still a lot of people that think like kind of black or white. So if you want to invest, you have to invest a considerable amount of money. Otherwise, or some people, there's like just go big risk, big reward, whatever the hell does it mean, But nowadays, I know there are even some platform, I never tried by myself yet, but there are platforms that are giving you some kind of trials in terms of you try without money, you use like fake money
trading.
just to see, you see how it goes, if you were in the right way or if you're just squashing up.
Yeah, so I think you're right about the black and white model.
Yeah.
And ironically, if there's one thing I learned from all the books and every investment advice you can possibly read on the internet, is consistency is the most important thing. Even if it's 10 euros a month, if you do that for your entire lifetime, it's going to be better than trying to do it with 1,000 euros in one go and trying to double it. The consistency of doing it is the thing that's going to make you the most money in the long run.
They say is no more than 10% ideally of your monthly salary.
I don't.
Right? Of course, if you wanna, look, if you wanna take your whole set of savings, and you wanna put it in the stock, well, good luck with that. But if
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Would you ever try with cryptos, or did you already try?
I tried early, back when Bitcoin was still $400. I doubled my money at the time. Took that, ran with it, and will never go back.
Yeah, okay, that was a nice
unpopular opinion. I think it's the biggest scam in history of mankind.
There's a lot of people actually that is coming out with that. I always kind of listen both sides, and I'm not taking, let's say, my side of it because I don't have enough education behind. But I do know that, especially if you do without relevant information about it, aka if you trade irresponsibly, you're gonna basically lose it all. At least if you don't have a huge amount of luck.
I think there's a lot of people, especially in our field, that are kind of drawn to the technology aspect of it, that I believe in religiously. But if you look at it, I think there's a lot of people in this field that have put a lot of life savings into it.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of those people that are basically very deep in the red. And I know for a fact some people I worked with lost everything.
Yeah, right.
Not literally everything, but like significant amounts of money that you could have bought a car or a house from even. And I think that's really, really sad. That's why I'm staying away from it very far.
Also because most of the critics that I heard for Bitcoin or every kind of crypto is that people is mainly rushed by short-term gains, I'm going to invest today, 1,000 euro, thanks. And I'm expecting that by tomorrow, I'm going to multiply my gains for, 5 times.
And that's how most people lost the money.
Yeah, and okay, that might happen, but the thing with crypto is that they are not actually anchored to some tangible value, and that's where the gambling comes, in my opinion.
Well, it's actually, from my perspective, this is almost turning into an investing podcast.
Yeah, but that's interesting. We never spoke about these things earlier.
For me, actually, it's not necessarily it not being a tangible thing. For me, and I'll probably catch a lot of flack in the comments for this, but
we're gonna be together, no worries.
The real thing about it is that the crypto markets are unregulated. I'm not saying that the regular stock market is the holy grail and a safe space to invest. Really isn't. But the crypto market has no laws whatsoever, and there are big entities that are able to pinch a few cents or hundreds of thousands of cents. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but they can take a little bit off every single transaction that happens, and they manipulate the way the cryptocurrencies behave, and it's not being regulated. It will never be realistically regulated, because if it happens, it also loses the attractiveness of all the people that are thinking to make a quick buck.
True.
So if it's either going to be regulated and then it loses its attractiveness, or it will continue not being regulated, and then it will always be a big scam, in my humble opinion. Again, maybe uneducated in the field itself. I think the technology is amazing, but I think as an investment way, only if you can, let's say, benefit of the actions of the big entities, then you should look into using it. Otherwise, stay away from it. Not financial advice, by the way.
All right. Sidney, it was a great conversation to deep dive into multiple topics. For sure, it would be great to have you again, to get back into your experience with AWS and see what's going on with your projects, and to discuss further about the infrastructural part. So thank you again for being with us, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Bye.